Well, I think we're going to begin. Not sure if construction is delaying him, but why don't we begin?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd just like to share that we have really, I guess I should thank this team behind me because this legislative update was originally going to be presented by John Helmholtz, and he was called out of town. And along with the rest of the audience, most of them are in meetings that they could not cancel, so we have kind of a scarce crew today. But I wanted to mention to you that the legislative update is going to focus primarily on the third grade retention. There was new information that was released probably 2 to 3 weeks ago. And I know that Pastor Matias is very interested in always knowing what is the implication for parents and their roles as well, and what information we will be sharing with them. So there's quite a bit in terms of the law and what our district has to do in order to be in compliance, but there will be other implications for parents, and it will be important for them to know the implications of the law as we move forward. I'll just mention that we have Matthew here who will bring our yearly preschool update. And then finally, Pastor Matias has asked me to come up with a list of recommendations for the remainder of the year. And I will do so, but I do look forward to any input that you all would have, and certainly it will be in draft as I present it to him. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Good morning,
Morning.
Reverend
Morning.
Matias, Ms. Slade, Ms. Lewis. This is the second to the last instructional council update for the year. Our last meeting was April 20th. We met from 1 to 3 p.m. at GRPS University. There were no new courses presented at that meeting. However, at the request of instructional council members, Amy Powney, mathematics curriculum supervisor, provided the council with an update on 2 mathematics resources available to GRPS teachers. And Amy is in the audience today if you have any detailed questions, because she is the math expert now. Go Math. Go Math was selected by the Elementary Mathematics Textbook Adoption Committee for K-5 implementation and is currently being piloted at Congress Elementary, Cesar E. Chavez Elementary, Campus Elementary building-wide. There's a conversation about the possibility of expanding the pilot to some middle school classes next year. The next resource that we discussed, and I just happen to have the book that goes with it, so I thought I'd here in front, is Algebra Nation. Amy informed us that the Michigan Department of Education has provided a fully funded resource called Algebra Nation to support our algebra students in meeting proficiency on Algebra 1 standards. These free resources include individual Algebra Nation student workbooks, which accompany and complement the online instructional resources and videos intended to reinforce and differentiate Algebra 1 content. A teacher classroom dashboard is available for progress monitoring of students within the Algebra 1 content. In addition, Amy has also provided 2 professional development sessions. These occurred in March for the implementation of Algebra Nation. Participants in these in these sessions were able to work collaboratively with colleagues to learn about and explore Algebra Nation resources, engage in learning how to use the resources to enhance whole group instruction, differentiation, student collaboration, and provide opportunities for dynamic assessment. Create a personal plan for how they will implement the use of Algebra Nation with their classes to teach an upcoming concept. In addition, Algebra Nation will be used in our 2017 GRPS High School Summer School Algebra 1 classes to support students in mastering the Algebra 1 content and standards. The information that you received in your packet indicates that the next instructional council meeting for this Thursday will be at GRPS University. We are going to be meeting at Innovation Central instead, due to the high school Spanish testing out that's going to be going on there. And because Dr. Kalambula and I and the presenter for the course, Spanish for Medical Personnel, will also be assisting with the testing out there. Thank you. Any questions at all regarding the math are best directed to Amy.
Well, I have a question. So do they have a regular textbook then in high school that they use? Okay. So this is just,
supplemental.
these are supplemental?
Yes.
Okay.
Supplemental resources.
Are these used in lower grades, like 7 or 8? There are kids who seem to be testing higher at the middle school.
It's a great question. I think the answer is yes, but Amy?
So some of the kids that are doing higher math at the middle school level, what curriculum are they using, or?
They use the same high school
Okay, they do.
curriculum, but they also have access to the
Okay.
I have a question that probably relates to this, and maybe Ms. Evans may need to answer, but when Ms. Downs-Lewis asked about textbooks, made me think of, quite a few times I've heard some, I guess, students saying that they haven't had textbooks, that they weren't allowed to maybe take some textbooks home, and mostly at the high school level, and I guess it's just kind of thrown out there in general to see if that is an issue, maybe not enough textbooks or anything in general.
If it's the school's choice, but we don't have any control over that, then they could, or the teacher's choice, sometimes the principals aren't aware as well. But we don't make that decision at a district level. As a matter of fact, if it's a priority school, in situations where we have classroom sets, we said to principals, they don't have to use a classroom set, they can have a book per student. So I would check with the school. The other thing that we've moved to do is include as many online resources, so I don't know if teachers are relying on those resources.
Yeah.
For support or not, but all of our ELA novels, and kids can get on their phones or laptops or.
Well, this has been particular, I guess, and this is obviously anecdotal, just conversations had with folks, and may have been talking with a student and suggested that they, we may have been talking about how to read a textbook, for example, and I've been told a couple of different times that, I'm either we don't use a textbook, which, like you said, it could just be a teacher deciding to use other supplementary things, or we do use a textbook, but I'm not allowed to bring it home. And I don't know, I guess on that last part, just wondering, I guess as an educator, what thoughts you might have about why, or the impact of not allowing a student to take a textbook home.
I think that the textbook is an extremely important tool. I also think homework is an extremely important tool. Sometimes those are teacher choices or building choices, but what would help us in terms of coming to an understanding of what the challenge is, if you have specific cases that we can follow through to the school and classroom, then we can better answer that question. Because all of our textbooks are automated, we know where books are lacking, and where we are in need of additional textbooks. When teachers need textbooks, they go through our automated system to request them. So what would be helpful, it's sort of a general statement, if we knew and we were able to follow through to the individual students.
Fair enough. So I guess
So, and then the other piece too, I do believe that many teachers are using more of the online resources too. My caution with that is that we have to make sure the kids can access them.
Yeah, definitely. So my only other thing in situations where the textbook is being used in the classroom and there are some restrictions or unavailability as far as taking it home, does that raise any concern in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. And well, I don't know of those situations.
Yeah.
That's the concern.
Fair enough. No, I
That's
get
my
that.
greatest
Yep,
concern.
totally. Okay. All right.
I would love to have those specific
Gotcha.
cases that you're referencing. As I said, there are situations where we have classroom sets, but that are supported with technology tools, and teachers do have to run some things off, but we know of those situations.
Okay. All right.
I hear of that a lot, and that's why I'm asking that we can trace it down to the very specific students, because I think it's bigger than not just having access to a textbook, at least from my observation.
Okay. Thank you.
But yes, it would be a huge concern for me. But homework is too, for me.
But there are schools that have decided not to do homework.
So I don't want to ever say that a school, because I don't want to be speaking in general terms. And I don't know of a principal that had just has said, oh, we're not going to do homework. I'm just saying that I support the use of homework. I support teachers reinforcing what's done in the classroom. So, but that's not something that I don't have control over that.
So that's a building decision or a teacher's decision.
We make recommendations at this level, but I don't know how it's monitored at each building level. I do believe practice is important, it's supported in research.
I guess since we're on this, I guess I'm just wondering if, and again, you're speaking person that you think there's value in homework, and I would imagine most of us think that, board, other cabinet folks, all the way down to probably most teachers. So with that premise, if it is rather universal, for lack of a better word, that we think in this district homework is important, should we have some
Policy language?
process, I don't know if policy, if it's to that level, but possibly. I'm just saying, is there a responsibility as a district that we do more to promote and ensure that at-home practice is occurring, at least that teachers are assigning that at-home practice?
I agree. I think, that there should be a policy encouraging, maybe not demanding, but certainly encouraging principals and building teachers that homework is important and that we support the idea of using homework.
Yeah, I guess I clarify. I don't necessarily think it would be a rise to the level of district policy. Not saying it couldn't, but just as I said now, I don't think it would, be to that level. But is there some responsibility for us to unilaterally push the issue a little bit, or promote it, or whatever language you want to use? I don't know.
Well, I think at the very least, some kind of rationale why we, whatever, elementary, middle, high school levels, give homework. It's not just to give homework, it's to supplement and given, either the little bit of time that we can cover it, we have to try and help them master it. So in some way,
I would think it's pretty routine that most teachers do provide, give out homework. And that's an individual, that's just common
Yeah.
practice as a teacher,
I don't find that to be true in
my experience.
my experience. But I think there's been this big move to move away from homework.
Not that I know of.
There has been. There-
but if they're moving away from homework because they don't have enough textbooks to assign to students, then that becomes a concern in my eyes.
That would be a concern, but homework is not always comprised or relying upon a textbook.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a worksheet.
Yep.
But the move that I think that you're referencing has nothing to do with the textbook. It has to do with bodies of research that came out that says there is no evidence that homework is impactful. But with any body of research, there's also research that can refute the research. And longer
So-
than.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we know that has not gone away is bodies of research around practice. And we know practice are things that we do a lot of and do more of, we get better at doing. So I personally, it's my personal opinion, there are many people who would probably argue to the contrary. I do believe homework has value when it is connected to maintenance of skills that kids have been taught and providing them opportunities for research, et cetera. I do think it has value. So if there is policy, however, you all have very general policy in relationship to homework. You might want to think about bringing that up as a work session to determine what the board's position is on homework, and to also work with the superintendent around what the parameters should look like in our district.
So,
Do you think it's something that we could discuss at a work session and maybe have presented to the teachers before school starts so that we're on the side of encouraging people to?
well, I think, first thing, so you said that it's, for your recollection, there is some policy that loosely.
Very general, I
Okay,
believe
so I
there
think, what we'll do, we'll first take a look at that at the ad hoc policy committee and take a look at that a little closer. And then Ms. Downs will, I guess from that review from the ad hoc policy committee, we can, at least as that subcommittee, determine if we think there should be more or less, whether that policy should be revised. And then from there, obviously, we can talk about it as a larger group, with the superintendent and see what the next steps might be, if that is some teacher interface or not. But yeah, we'll work through that.
I would not have the authority
Yeah,
to answer
indeed.
your question,
Yeah.
to put it on a work session agenda.
Right.
But in terms of process, you
Yeah.
now have a working policy committee. So it seems
Right.
like it would be a relatively easy
Yeah.
thing to bring to a level of priority.
Yeah, so I'll handle that, Ms. Lewis. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
I think it's our legislative. All right.
Everything else is 306.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Trying to
Morning.
project on screen for us now. Thanks, Matthew. Perfect.
And we have that in front of us, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
You got a version.
I just want to point out that first slide says Public Act. It should be 306. The rest of the slides have 306, but kind of, so it's Public Act 306.
That's different. Okay. Good morning.
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 Roseanne and I would like to spend the next few minutes kind of reviewing specifically the third grade reading legislation, the law, Public Act 306. Before you, you have just a two-pager. The content that you have before you is the same as the content on the PowerPoint, which is behind you. And overwhelmingly, the content that we're going to be sharing with you today is coming also from MDE. It's been presented by the Kent ISD, and so we're just trying to maintain this consistency in terms of the information and the flow of that through our system. So, to begin, we'll talk about just the law first, and we'll talk about some of the implications or intended purposes of it. This legislation was first introduced a couple of years ago, and it took a little while to kind of work its way through the process. Thank you. And then it was signed into law last October 2016. And I think part of the rationale for introducing and moving this legislation was kind of Michigan's test scores on some large-scale standardized assessments, specifically the MSTEP test and the NAEP. As recently as the 2015 NAEP, Michigan was ranked 41st in the nation for fourth grade reading. I think that raised certainly more flags than usual, and that started the process or the ball rolling to move this legislation forward. Ultimately, the purpose of this legislation, this law, is to help more students to become proficient in reading by the end of their third grade year. And it's not just intended to kind of monitor students' progress, but more importantly, to provide a series of supports, multiple supports for those students in K through 3, or perhaps even pre-K through 3, who are not yet reading on grade level or on track for third grade reading proficiency. The law also states, however, that a child may be retained in third grade if he or she is one or more grade levels behind in reading at the end of third grade. We can talk a little bit more about that in these next few minutes. As I mentioned, the intent of this law is to ensure that all students are reading at grade level by the end of grade 3, to be promoted then to grade 4. As part of the work, the resources, the processes for those K through 3 students, there will be screening and monitoring measures in place to monitor the students' reading skills during their K-3 career. There'll be a use of multiple diagnostic tests that help teachers to identify and accurately address the areas of need for each student. There's a series of comprehensive, evidence-based reading strategies that'll be in place, and specifically an instructional focus on phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary.
What's the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics? I mean, just obviously there's some nuance there.
So phonemic awareness, right, that's being aware of those phonemes, of the sounds,
That
being
they're-
able to hear it, correct. And then phonics is putting the connections
Gotcha.
together between the sound and the actual symbol of the letter.
Thank you.
For our English language learners, and really for all of our learners, of those, there's an ongoing series or suite of assessments that provides data to teachers and to coaches and to specialists. These assessments will provide ideally breakdown for these 5 different instructional areas that we just listed. It'll also help point to specific strategies in response to areas of need for each of those 5 instructional areas. There's also modeling, there's guided practice. And for our English language learners, certainly there'll be continued encouragement for instruction in the native language, opportunities for speech population and feedback in that language. And offhand, I'm thinking of some programs that are already in place, certainly at Southwest, but also at Burton, Buchanan, and Chavez, classroom instruction that's already occurring and has been occurring for our K1 and 2 students in their native language. For those students in K through 3 that are identified with as needing additional support, there'll be an individual reading improvement plan, IRIP. Part of this process also includes notifying parents and identifying tools for them to help their students at home. Part of the process includes requirements for principals and teachers for targeted professional development with a focus on, again, those 5 areas that we discussed earlier, and really helping to interpret the data and help make it actionable at the classroom level. There'll also be literacy coaches. These literacy coaches may be building-based or share buildings, and they will have responsibilities beyond just classroom instruction. They're also not permitted to do administrative tasks, but to really focus on the needs of those students in grades K through 3 that need additional support.
Would these be degreed people? Not,
And as part of the process too, is to really extend the learning process through the summer, through summer reading camps, staffed by highly effective teachers, and providing specific intervention strategies and supports for those kids that need them, addressing their specific needs. These are some of the interventions that I actually just listed already. Now, from the parent perspective, certainly there's, parents are certainly encouraged to be involved every step of the way. and there'll be more communication with parents about their child's needs and their assessment results. Parents can be assured that their child's reading progress, again, K through 3, will be closely monitored. And if their child is considered below grade level or not yet on track to be proficient by the end of 3rd grade, there'll be some additional supports and recommendations made, including extra instruction or support in the child's area of need, again, targeting their specific needs, ongoing checks, not just once a year, not just 3 times a year, but more frequently than that. And then certainly there'll be collaboration between the teacher or the school and the parent to help identify a targeted read-at-home plan for their child based upon their child's reading level or their needs. And if at the end of 3rd grade, parents are notified that their child may need to be retained, the parent has the right to meet with school administration or district administration to request an exemption if it's in the best interest of the child. Roseanne can speak to more of those details in a few minutes in terms of options.
So, looking at, so how will this affect the child, right? Parents need to know that their schools will use a screener, K through, right now we do use a screener, but especially that the K through 3 students. And then if they're identified as having, certain areas of need, then doing more in-depth diagnostic screeners and then progress monitoring on those foundation skills, right? And this will be identified right away, right from that initial screener. Also, parents will, know and be notified that if there is this area of need, that each of their students, their children will have an individual reading improvement plan. And that plan will be monitored closely. It will be progress monitored. The parents will be aware of the plan. There will be a home component as well, and it'll become part of that student's learning.
What about, so kids who have special needs and so on, they'll be exempt from this?
Right, so we will get to the exemptions in just a second, right? But yes, they will have it. Also, knowing that this law is, in place, there will be professional development around those foundations, the 5 components of reading. Also on how do you read the data, how do you write an individualized reading plan so teachers are well equipped, right, to not only write them, but also talk to parents and inform parents as well.
So when you mention a screener, this is something other than M-STEP or the NAEP?
Right, so right now we use the map, right? So at the
Okay.
beginning of the fall, we use a map, and that kind of gives you an idea of where your student is, so that would be that screener.
Similar to what other school districts give, like called dribbles or something like that, Gibbles? Is it similar to that?
What you use after, Dibbles is what you use after math.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So this law really is going to affect our current kindergartners. So when our current kindergartners go to 3rd grade, that's when, they'll be looking at the proficiency and, the decision will be made whether, the child will be retained or not. So all these benchmarks have to be in place as these kindergartners go to 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade, right? So we are keeping a portfolio, so to speak, on all their progress on those standards. So it says a student will not be promoted to 4th grade unless they receive a reading score within less than a year behind on the 3rd grade ELA assessment. So even before they take that ELA assessment in 3rd grade, we as a district will know where they are because we've been monitoring their progress, right? They will not be promoted if they don't show a 3rd grade reading level on another test approved by the superintendent of public instruction. So if they have shown, proficiency on one of the other tests they take, that would be considered. Also, show a grade 3 reading level through portfolios or collection of student work in all grade 3 ELA standards. So it becomes really important that we give professional development around that standard-based grading, keeping portfolios and exactly where our students are on those given standards, right? Also, the student will be only required to repeat 3rd grade one time.
Now, is that first time, is this the sort of retention that requires a parent support? Or can a parent pretty much say that they don't want their child to be retained based on this?
Right, so because it's law right now, right, the parent can have a meeting with the superintendent of the district and the teachers, but there has to be evidence that that
That they
child
can
is
meet the
performing
mark.
correct at third grade. And so that's why that keeping the portfolio will become so important. The screeners and the progress monitoring of those standards will become so important because we know that M-STEP is a one-shot, test. But if there is also additional evidence that the student can and has been performing on grade level,
So
then
just
definitely will be
just
something that will be considered.
playing it out in an extreme manner, if I'm a parent of a third grader and I believe that my child can read at grade level, and the district has provided evidence saying the contrary, then at that point, the onus is on me as a parent to somehow, through the portfolio process or some other means, to prove that my child can indeed be at grade level. No? Okay, I'm asking, yeah. I mean, again, I'm just
Yeah.
taking it to the extreme.
The parent can file can
Correct.
request a good cause exemption within a
Okay.
month after being notified.
Right.
So,
And bring all that data in, and everything will be considered, before that final decision.
But again, what
is
I'm
made.
bringing in, there's some onus on me. That evidence that I'm bringing in is, again, that onus is on me at that point to bring in that evidence.
Correct, at that
I
point.
don't want that to
Right.
be a public statement. So we're
Okay.
asking schools to create the portfolio. And students, if they're reading on grade level, we will consider first, did they read on grade level using the assessment that all other students? So we're comparing students to students as well as to a set benchmark. But then we will look at other artifacts as well. But I would not say that the primary thrust of.
No.
consideration will be what
No, again, I was, speaking in an extreme case, an outlying case where the district has done its due diligence and has determined that they don't think this child is on grade level, but that parent, for whatever reason, disagrees with the district's decision, and in that extreme outlying case, then at that point, I'm assuming it will be on the parent through that exemption process that you mentioned to bring evidence in contrary to the district's determination. In an extreme case. But again, by no means would it be our interest to find students or find reason to retain a student. I'm totally,
I think
The
we would be considering
Right.
I'm assuming that this is not just a one-shot deal.
No.
That along the way, you have evidence
Yeah.
that this child is reading at grade level. It's not just a boom. I mean, you know
Yeah.
that from the
Indeed.
first grade, second grade,
Right,
third grade.
so.
So there's
any-
longitudinal data on
Right,
this.
any
Right.
exemptions that are brought in will be reviewed by the superintendent, right? And then the decision will be made by the superintendent
Yeah.
and the cabinet, right? And they will make the final decision about that. But definitely, they will look at all the evidence that's in front of them.
It's a holistic approach.
All right? And in fact, some of the exemptions, right, so if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan, that will definitely be, looked at and taken into consideration. English language learners, right? If they have been enrolled in the district for less than 2 years, that would be taken into consideration. If it's in the best interest of the student and requested within 30 days, so if the parent requests that, with the best interest student, again, that evidence will be brought in, the superintendent and, the superintendent's cabinet will look at that, but the final decision will be made by the superintendent.
Or if the student is proficient in all the other subject areas except for reading, then that can be a consideration also.
Sure.
So now we're looking at, the next one, right? No, the next slide. One, right, so now what happens if the child has to repeat third grade, right? They have made the decision. So class assignments will be with a highly effective, a highly rated teacher or a reading specialist, because now the student will also have that individualized reading plan, right? Most of the day will be spent on reading instruction, yet some fourth grade standards will be also taught so that the child doesn't fall behind, right? And then they will have that independent reading improvement plan that we talked about with extra support. And the progress will be monitored within that year, right? Will be closely monitored to look at the progress the student is making. Also, what can the parent do at home? Read at home daily with their child, right? Read out loud. Listen to your child read. You can do some echo reading where, you read and then the child will repeat that line back to you, right? Read together. And as we talked about, even that homework, just that practice of reading and then making meaning out of what you're reading, right? And then we're asking parents, talk to your child about reading, right? Ask what the child remembers or share what you just read about. Ask questions about the reading. Connect it to, maybe events that are happening in the child's life. So we're just talking about reading while we're practicing that reading.
Just
So-
wondering, since, since the number of ELA students has risen, I mean, our families are increasing. I think of like Harrison, Westwood, the whole west side has a large contingency of Hispanic students that struggle with reading, and budgets are tight. So having to give them, reading specialists and those kinds of things, how does that work when a school is strapped for resources and they have to figure out how to meet that need?
So one of the things that, we can put in place is really looking at the teachers in front of the students right now, right? And doing professional development around reading strategies that can also be done in the classroom to help and support the students. We're talking about the kindergartners right now, really monitoring them, looking at those foundation skills, and then the practice of those foundation skills, and really helping and supporting our teachers in our buildings around being reading teachers in front of our students. The K through 2, you really look at teaching a child how to read, right? So you're teaching to read and then you're reading to learn from when you go up to third and fourth grade. So really looking at what does professional development look like and support look like for our K through 2 teachers so that they can and become experts at teaching our kids how to read.
Somewhat related to that question, I know district-wide, at least my understanding, when we use the word coach, that has been more so as kind of peer coaching for teachers. In this context, use of literary coach, we're talking more direct student service here, correct? I'm looking at what the law is about, the second slide, and it talks about use of a literary coach.
Right, so the literacy coach can really, in twofold, work with the students, but also work with the teachers on best practices around literacy.
So to that, is this, obviously, I guess, the law requires us to have literacy coaches in buildings in which there are children who are not on pace to provide that
It's one of the
service?
it's one of the recommendations,
right.
it's an option. And
It's-
another option is to be more intentional in terms of the student-teacher assignment.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm just gonna sit up here because I don't like this yelling over their back, but in order to meet the mandate of the law, some of the ISD has also begun developing a cohort of coaches, knowing that when we say to districts, you need to have a coach, it's an unfunded mandate. So they currently are developing coaches as well. Now, do they have enough to service all of our students in all of our buildings? No. It is an example of a mandate that perhaps has not had the funds attached to it yet. But it is important because we certainly like to see coaches work with students when we have enough, but building the capacities and competencies of teachers is critical. That
Absolutely.
means that all students will get a stronger teacher.
Yet another not funded mandate. Yeah, it's quite common.
I do think, too, that with some of these partners that we are having in higher ed, it would make sense to me that as a district, we would speak to these, those that are preparing our future educators and say, this is what they need to know. Especially from an urban context, this is what they need to know, and then figuring out a way to give them that experience so that they're coming out with some skills that help them go off running when they start their careers.
That's a critical observation, and we've been having conversations with Grand Valley and Western, and just around that challenge as well, though, because they feel that their curricula is filled and full, and they find it sometimes difficulty. We've approached them about getting more services or skills in place for second language students. And they're having difficulty sometimes fitting all of that in. They are aware that there needs to be probably some additional strategies in place to support students as they go into urban districts, or just meeting the needs of kids who are very school dependent. But we have not settled on. Sharon Pitts is also, her office has also begun some work with them as well. Because ideally, when we have teachers that are ready to come into our schools, that are aware of these 5 elements of reading and how to teach them and integrate them, then the burden of professional development in our district is not quite so intense.
So, so to kind of end our presentation on the law, the last slide talks about, also talk to your child every day, about experiences, encourage them to write and read early on, right, even at home. So we're wondering if there's any other questions that we can answer?
I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but just clarifying, we're talking about, for English language learners, encouraging instruction in native language and feedback in native language. I'm assuming what we're talking about is kind of a hybrid approach in a sense, because obviously the assessment and the reading mark itself is in English, but to help a child understand what I'm actually trying to lead you towards, okay, just, yeah. I thought I knew the answer, but I guess I didn't even ask a question, but, right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Matthew Beresford, Director of Early Childhood for GRPS. Happy to be here today to do this early childhood update for the Academic Achievement Committee board members. I thought that last night, that inclusion celebration was a great first conversation to kind of tee this one up. And I really want this to be conversational. So feel free to, just like the third grade reading, to ask questions in between the slides too. And I'm not sure, did you get the PowerPoint printed on your end? So if you want to spin here, and we can just kind of go back and forth. We'll start with the mission. This mission was developed 2.5 years ago when we started working together between the ECSE preschool classrooms and the GSRP preschool classrooms to marry basically our two missions together on our new inclusion models mission.
I'm not familiar with that first
Early childhood special ed,
special ed, okay.
which Laura Lamore leads, right?
Last night, okay.
Yeah.
Keep me up here.
And so those two groups, those classrooms were separated before, preschoolers with IEPs versus preschoolers without, and we really knew we could do better. And so about 2.5 years ago, Laura looped me in and said, we can work on this and improve this. When she came on board, I came on board, and we did the work and did a lot of collaborative work between the two staffs to really dream up what's the best model that we could launch. So I believe in also working for a mission greater than myself, and we've developed and did a lot of mindset kind of mission work with the team, the early childhood staff, the teachers and paras, to make sure that their mind is there too. That you're coming to work every day working for a mission greater than yourself at GRPS in the early childhood classrooms. And when you do that, then teaching and learning really gets highlighted. And the other stuff, or a little small barrier of the day, doesn't become so big, right? So I believe in audience engagement too. So I'm going to use one of the third grade reading strategies and ask you to read together with me this mission. And it's a pretty, you know, my wife picks on me for long run-on sentences. This one might technically be there. I don't know. It's got
I
a
will
lot of commas.
check. I was an English teacher, so I
All
was-
right. Well, we got some commas in there too, so we can work that.
there's punctuation there.
Are you ready? Through a partnership with families, our collaborative mission is to provide students a world-class pre-kindergarten education using a multi-tiered approach and best practices to teach every student within play-based environments that support critical thinking,
Skills.
develop positive self-esteem, facilitate independence, and an excitement for lifelong learning. Thank you.
This, as an English teacher.
Yeah.
It's quite a long sentence,
It is.
one sentence.
Technically, it's okay.
It fills the back of a t-shirt, because our t-shirts, we put it on the
Get any
back.
English teachers going,
Yeah. But what it gets at is that we're partnering with families right at the beginning, right? That requirement for GSRP is that we do home visits, a fall and a spring. And when we do those fall first home visits, they are strength-based, not judgment-based, like maybe a past home visit that they might have experienced, right? But we're landing on what are their hopes and dreams for their preschoolers learning for the year, and partnering around some goals.
So you visit every special ed kid or every kindergartner?
Every GSRP qualified and enrolled early childhood, whether they have an IEP or not.
Okay.
Yep.
And so they,
We pre-schedule them, and we only teach preschoolers Monday through Thursday in the district. On Fridays, we have that time
okay.
and that contractual time, right, to do those home visits. So usually 2 or 3 a Friday for about 45 minutes to an hour. So moving on, the early childhood staff, this is qualifications here, you know, the grant, Lansing has definitely doubled down on the funding for GSRP for 4-year-old preschool in the state of Michigan, right? And they want qualified staff working in those classrooms, right? So they set certain requirements, and then we take it even farther as a public school district. So all teachers are elementary certified, because in the spring, if they wanna taste the grass on the other side of the fence in kindergarten or something, they have to be a state certified with the ZA or ZS to jump the fence and bid into something else within GRPS. So that's why we have that there. That's slightly higher than the grant's expectation that they have an active teaching cert and all that.
Sure, posses, you got posses working for you in the second sentence?
Possess? Yeah. So the paraprofessionals possess a child development
I
associate.
don't think that's spelled right.
All right, I'm working on that one.
I won the 5th grade spelling bee, by the way. Anyway.
I'll fix that.
Oh, man.
So the teachers have transitioned to Teaching Strategies Gold student assessment and lesson planning within it. That's all aligned to the Michigan Early Childhood Standards. That was a jump, for sure, to jump to an online student assessment. And I'll show you that student assessment in more depth in future slides. But the good news is it gives us data, right? And I'll be able to share and highlight that data. That was never pullable before if it's only trapped in a file in a classroom, right? And not combinable to your whole class and reportable, right? So it really substantiates the investment that GRPS has done in early childhood. To get all kids to 3rd grade by 3rd grade, we know that we have to take advantage of this bonus year of learning. And then the teachers and paraprofessionals use that student data source when they pull reports on Fridays to drive the instruction. They can pull a report that shows where a majority of the class is low in on a certain objective, and they can then build lesson plans for the next week that have activities to reinforce that area. And then also working within the district's 3 priorities. On February 6th was a district-wide PD day. The early childhood educators came together at CA Frost, spent the whole morning trying to differentiate what backwards mapping, which is one of the 3 priorities, what that means for early childhood. And really what it got down to is making sure that we're not just doing turkeys because it's Thanksgiving time or November, right? That we have to let that stuff go. And we have to figure out what are the children's interests in the classroom and incorporate them into the learning, right? And do rich studies-based work. Studies on restaurants, studies on animals, studies on buildings, studies on pets. And they know from those first home visits what that child's interested in learning. They look for a common one. And then they give some flexibility that if the kids want to go off into another section of it, to follow them. And so their backwards mapping work kind of maps out that whole 4 to 6 weeks of learning cycle and thinks about what is the knowledge, that transfer knowledge, that we want these children leaving the activities and this learning with. So this slide shows our expansion. I assumed the director position from teaching within the classrooms. The last year I taught was 13-14. So I assumed that director position of early childhood. On the 14-15 school year, we are serving 521 that year at 19 locations and 29 classrooms. And then we just kept going and going. So you can see continual growth there. Through the transformation plan, even before the current superintendent, there was decisions to make to close certain early childhood centers, right? And really try to find preschool learning next to the kindergarten classrooms in the elementaries, where parents can develop a relationship with that building principal, give high fives to the K teachers as they walk their preschooler in and out every day. And that has been humongous for our transformation plan and for our enrollment numbers as a district, because parents can have a great preschool year, but if they're not building relationships and seeing that school as a long-term plan,
Right.
then they might disappear after the 4-year-old year and not transition to K. So you can see that in 17-18, we're going to be at 40 GSRP classrooms that I lead. Now, there's other 4-year-olds learning besides those 40 for next year. That doesn't consider the Montessori Children's House classrooms, which there will be 8 of them next year. 4 at GR Montessori, 3 at North Park, Wellerwood, and then 1, which is that first bullet point of Ridgemore Park Montessori. There they blend the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, and the kindergartners in one classroom in that Children's House model. And the 4-year-olds we qualify under the GSRP, but I don't technically fund those teachers or, have the Montessori's under my umbrella because they're under the building, right? So technically, if we looked at that, the total early childhood classrooms for 4-year-olds might be more like 52 for next year. There's an exciting second bullet point there for next year with the addition of a second classroom at Burton Elementary and transitioning that school from half-day to full-day learning, Monday through Thursday. We know from past research that this district has conducted the Early Reading First Grant 1 and 2. That was a federal grant that we conducted, that 30% more knowledge is learned in that preschool year if it's a full-day schedule, not a half-day. It's a matter of equity, and I'm excited that it's launching at Burton. And then also we have a groundbreaking that we discussed last night for Buchanan. And as soon as the new Buchanan opens, a second classroom is in that plans for the first floor so that Buchanan would go to full day in the next school year.
Do they do full day at Aberdeen? I know they have.
Yep.
That's full day, okay. Have we seen any proof that having the kids in the elementary buildings encourages them to stay and go to kindergarten then?
Yes, Steve's team and the OIS team can pull that data and reports that
No,
to the
just
superintendent
that
regularly. And we're seeing it jumping from maybe 30% that were retained from their preschool to our kindergartens to around 70%
great.
right now, and we're still going. I mean, we know as a district that's a critical transition that we have to do well. For the last 2 years, I've led a district-wide preschool to kindergarten transition morning where the parents come, the preschoolers go over into the kindergarten classrooms, the principal meets with these incoming parents, to answer questions and navigate what would be the same and what would be different. The kindergartners get to go and enjoy the centers in the preschool room and stuff, and they kind of enjoy that break too.
Yeah, it's a relief for parents too, because it's a natural transition then.
And the big thing before, when we weren't in Every Elementary, was that their older siblings might be right over at Coit, but we weren't in Coit until this year. So having preschool, the last classroom got launched on Halloween day of this school year at Shawmut, where the principal at first all summer thought she didn't have a space, but then she approached me at the end of September and said, Matthew, I think we have a space. And I drove right over and I said, yeah, we can rush license this and get this launched by Halloween. So that's huge too. So then at Coit, it's transitioning to IB, right? With its IB launch, it needs a feeder of equal pattern between its pre-K and Ks. So we need a second preschool classroom there. And we filled that first classroom this year very quickly. So we have no doubt that there's more need in that neighborhood.
IB meaning
International Baccalaureate.
in kindergarten?
It will have touch points of that thinking all the way into the preschool classroom when we're talking about what knowledge we want students to learn and leave with, right? Right, yep. And then these are the objectives in Teaching Strategies Gold that we assess, that whole child. There's a lot there. 36, unless the child's an English language learner, then that 37 and 38 comes up for demonstrating progress in listening to and understanding English and demonstrating progress in speaking English. It does balance kind of what we know, that to get to kindergarten readiness, there has to be a balance between social, emotional, and cognitive, along with the academics. But I thought it would be fun to just dive right in a little more in depth into one of them. So here is Objective 8. And again, it's saying that Teaching Strategy Gold guides the teachers through that crucial process of evaluating children's knowledge, skills, and behaviors. There's a color-coded progressions, like that graph below, of development, making it easy for the teacher to accurately assess where is that child displaying their knowledge currently at. The purple band is kind of the top tier, and that goes all the way into the kindergarten ages. But the blue certainly is on meeting expectations for a 4-year-old, young 5-year-old. But you can see if you had this kind of example for every one of those 36 objectives, and they have videos online too, so you can watch a student displaying it to kind of say, oh, does this little 1-minute video look like this child or not? So they can really get it dialed in. The types of data that they collect is through that TS Gold. Every classroom has an iPad that has the TS Gold app on it. It also has high quality preschool learning activity games, math and language arts, and pre-writing and writing games in it. So the students get that iPad during the 1-hour choice time, AM and PM, and then the teachers use it throughout the day to take little videos and photos of children learning. And then also that portfolio idea that they were talking about, the 3rd grade reading, that is still a live piece within the early childhood classrooms. Even though we've gone to this digital assessment, they all have work samples, writing prompts 3 times a year, examples, and it's just incredible to watch their fine motor skills come to life over that year. The way they can write their name, leaving, going into kindergarten, when they couldn't even write a letter in September. And then this is the exciting part, where we look at, on the left, that fall 2016 checkpoint data from TS Gold. If we're looking at the red is below their age expectation. You can see it's very obvious for math there. Math is a consistent challenge all the way up the grades, right? But also language and literacy is key to getting to kids to 3rd grade reading by 3rd grade. And look at those gains. Look at how many are meeting or exceeding in literacy and language. Last year, when we wrapped the year, we looked at this as a whole team. And this data is not isolated of preschoolers without IEPs or preschoolers with IEPs. I've said from the start, when we've launched this inclusion model, that if we're gonna move kids, we're gonna move all the kids, right? Because we're running these inclusion classrooms where they're all learning together, so I'm only reporting data up that's mixed. So at the end of the spring of 2016, before we started this school year, our language was 81%, it's not on that slide, and the literacy was 89% for meeting or exceeding, very high, right? 81, 89, but I told the team when we launched this year, we can do better, and when we write our evaluation goals, let's write a common goal of moving that language and literacy by 5% across the board for our department. And I was happy to report last week to all the EDs and Teresa that we did do it. We hit it by 6 to 7%. So if you look at literacy, it was at 94.8% to finish this school year versus last school year that we were at 89. And language was at 81% last year, but we finished this year at 89.4%. So we threw the challenge up, and they all met it or exceeded that challenge. So that was great as a team. And again, all of this data wasn't available to anyone to validate the important work that our educators were doing every day with 4-year-olds in this district. So now I'm open to questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, just compliment you on your good work. I've definitely heard from a few folks in general that they really feel like the early childhood is one of the strengths of the district, and obviously there's been some growth under your leadership, so just really want to,
Thank you.
proverbial-
Teresa gives me the compliment that I'm a hustler, right? And I say, when I get calls from families and I've got to wait list their child in the fall, that keeps my sense of urgency. That keeps me hustling every day for more opportunities. And it's a balance in our elementaries, right? It's working and partnering with those principals to land on space, to navigate the day-to-day. If there's a parent issue or whatnot, what level do they take care of and what level do they text me on and I can support, right? But that's what it takes, is a shared leadership to support these. But the feedback from the principals is like, oh, wow, these kindergartners are coming in so strong now. So it'll be exciting
Yeah.
as we go forward and watch this year's kindergartners get to 3rd grade reading, which I have no doubt they'll get there.
So do we identify these kids out in the community just based on census and so on, that we know that there's a 4-year-old living at such and such an address and so on, and
No, we don't have that much data because that census is only done every
10 years? Yeah.
10 years, so that's not the best source. But we do know that there's roughly 5,700-ish every year in Kent County, 4-year-olds. And like I was showing, we're serving about 800. We know that our kindergarten numbers are around 1,300 kindergartners. And so there's still some that aren't being served within GRPS classrooms that live in our district that are served within the community business organizations, other community preschools and stuff, which the grant also supports too, Head Start too.
Oh, Head Start goes.
But we know as a county, when we look at the big county data, because, GSRP, we've kept ours to ourselves as a district, as a subrecipient for the funding from Lansing. Every other district in this county reports to the ISD, and they lead their classrooms, right? But it just didn't make sense for us with our scale. We knew what we were doing in early childhood. We just wanted to make it stronger and keep. So when we look at how many they serve and how many we serve out of that 5,700, we're hitting about an 80% threshold. We know that there's a certain amount of income status that a mom might not be working and not need to work and might not believe in early childhood by doing their own homeschooling thing and such. But 80% is above the state average of 70%. So we're doing pretty well in the county.
And I think if I don't know from a marketing perspective, but, but targeting those to say, either use our facility or come in as a way to bring them in is critical as well. I mean, that's Yeah,
That's
many
my
young
summer
families
work.
are looking for that opportunity or ways to engage, and, because they know the social aspect of that is critical. It's one thing to isolate my kid, and I'm doing that, but when I see others,
Peers and all
yeah,
that.
that becomes really critical. So it's really exciting that you guys are doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have quite the marketing machine. Those brochures I wanted to share with you just to highlight kind of the direction, but then you see those free preschool signs all around our schools in our city.
Yep.
And those are even logoed with GRPS and world-class preschool stickers on them too, just to give them even more straight line to us. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I believe that with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.